wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa tabi'i wa man wala. Brothers, in the first khutbah, I've recited some of the verses, 5 verses from the Surat Al-Kahf. From the Surat Al-Kahf, I've recited 5 verses. And I prefer to mention the words of Allah Azza wa Jal over my words, because the words of Allah Azza wa Jal are so concise, and Allah mentions a lot of subjects, a lot of deep meanings in just a few verses. And if we can explain these verses in English, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala in the first ayah says that He orders the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam to bring an example of this dunya. What is this dunya? He says that this dunya is like a rain that Allah Azza wa Jal sends down to a ground and to a land, and this land, because of this rain, becomes green. This land becomes green, and the vegetation appears because of this rain. Then suddenly, all these things disappear. Suddenly, all these things become dry, and they become broken into pieces. That is Allah Azza wa Jal, how He mentions for us the reality of this dunya. He says that is this dunya. It's like that. It does not last forever. This dunya does not last forever. As the green land, a green land does not last forever. And then Allah Azza wa Jal mentions in the second ayah, He brings He compares the reality of this dunya to the reality of al-akhirah. Although there is no comparison between dunya and akhirah, because al-akhirah that lasts forever, but Allah Azza wa Jal is doing this for the sake of clarification and for the sake of persuasion, to be persuaded that this is the reality of dunya and this is the reality of al-akhirah. He says that wealth and the children and all the things that you receive in this dunya and you get it, they are all, he said, these are all adornment of this worldly life, He says it's zina, it's adornment, but he connects this to this dunya, and this dunya is temporary, so that is just a temporary zina, so it does not last forever. But when Allah Azza wa Jal mentions al-akhirah, mentions the day of judgment, He says وَالْبَاقِيَاتُ الصَّالِحَاتِ, but the things, the good deeds that make you enter Jannah, these things last forever. وَالْبَاقِيَاتُ الصَّالِحَاتِ. So here Allah Azza wa Jal said, then He says that these are good. Al-akhirah is good, and this is the place the place of hope. So here Allah Azza wa Jal mentions 3 descriptions, or let's say 3 features or 3 qualities of al-akhirah, that dunya, this world, lacks all these things. He mentions that this al-akhirah is permanent, but this dunya is just a temporary. So absolute permanency is for al-akhirah. Then he said that dunya, he says al-akhirah is good, but it's absolute good. So for akhirah is absolute goodness, but for dunya, yes, sometimes dunya is good, but it's not pure. It's just good, because you see that if there's a thing that has pleasure, you see that one side is pleasure, the other side is pain. Or you see inside is pain, the outside is pleasure, or the inside is pleasure, the outside is pain. So there's no pure goodness in this dunya, but al-akhirah is purely good. And then he said that al-akhirah is the place of hope. Is that what you have to expect? That's what you have to work for. Is that what you have to look for? This is the day of judgment. And then Allah Azza wa Jal, after mentioning that, He directly mentions that the last days of this dunya. He mentions just the events that happened before al-akhirah. He said, وَيَوْمَ نُسَيِّرُ الْجِبَالَ. Why Allah Azza wa Jal is doing this? He is telling us that as I do not mention this dunya, I do not describe the dunya in a way that takes long time, to mention in a few pages. Let's say That's how you deal. That's what you have to deal with this dunya in the same way. You shouldn't work for this dunya as you stay forever. You shouldn't work for this dunya as it lasts forever. So that's why Allah Azza wa Jal, He briefly mentions this dunya and describes this dunya. He then immediately goes to the day of judgment. He said, وَيَوْمَ نُسَيِّرُ الْجِبَالَ. The day that comes, that when the mountains, all the mountains, that Allah Azza wa Jal pulls them out of their places, and they're hovering around these big mountains. And then, as ulama say, that then all these mountains will broken and will come down once again. Then وَتَرَى الْأَرْضَ بَارِزَةٌ. At that time, the ground or the earth will be level, will be plain. Nothing on this earth, no buildings, no trees, no mountains, nothing, just a plain place. Then Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَحَشَرْنَاهُمْ. Then we bring them together. Why? For judgment, to judge them. So all the people will gather, Allah will gather them to stand before Allah Azza wa Jalla to be investigated. Why what they did in this dunya. So, and then he says, فَلَمْ نُغَادِرْ مِنْهُمْ أَحَدًا. We will not leave a person behind. So you cannot escape at that day. We all have to stand before Allah Azza wa Jalla to be judged by Allah Azza wa Jalla. So no one can escape. Even if you have wealth, even if you have everything, that is something that you cannot do anything on that day. Because you stand before Allah and with your deeds. Then Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَعُرِضُوا عَلَىٰ رَبِّكَ صَفًّا. People that will be presented in rows and ranks before Allah Azza wa Jalla. They stand. And Allah Azza wa Jalla at that time He says, وَلَقَدْ جِئْتُمُونَ كَمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ. لَقَدْ جِئْتُمُونَ. You have come to us, certainly you have come to us as we created you in the first place in this dunya. As the Prophet ﷺ explains that on the day of judgment, people will come barefooted and naked and uncircumcised. As they came to this dunya, on the day of judgment, they came and stand before Allah Azza wa Jalla in the same situation. That is what Allah Azza wa Jalla, then Allah Azza wa Jalla, Allah Azza wa Jalla that time judges them. He said, بَلْ زَعَمْتُمْ أَن لَن نَجْعَلَ لَكُمْ مَوْعِدًا. This is a khitab. Allah Azza wa Jalla talks to kuffar. But this is also, we can generalize this for all of us. He says that you were thinking and you were claiming that Allah Azza wa Jalla will not make an appointment for you. That's He's talking to kuffar. But we can apply this verse to us, because there are Muslims, they treat this dunya and they deal with this dunya as there's no al-akhirah. As there's no al-akhirah. They are following this pleasure, and as the pleasure of this dunya is the last pleasure. So Allah Azza wa Jal says that, no, you were thinking that Allah Azza wa Jal will not judge you, you won't come back to us. وَوُضِعَ الْكِتَابِ. Then at that time, the court starts. At that time, Allah Azza wa Jal puts the books of people, that all the things that in this dunya they did, all the things that written in this dunya, Allah puts them in front of them. And He says, اقرأ كتابك. Read by yourself. Because you have to admit that you have done all these things. Even if you do not admit, you cannot deny. Because these things are all written. And then at that time, al-mujrimun, those people that they did injustice to themselves. Al-mujrimun, the criminals, sinners, all people that they go against the rules of Allah Azza wa Jal. At that time, they become fearful because of what they see, and they say, woe to us, because of the book, that everything that written on this book, every small and big thing that we did in this dunya, everything written. إِلَّا أَحْصَاهَا, and written, and Allah Azza wa Jal enumerated them. وَوَجَدُوا مَا عَمِلُوا حَاضِرًا. Everything they did, Allah placed in front of them. وَلَا يَظْلِمُ رَبُّكَ أَحَدًا. Allah Azza wa Jal does not do injustice to any person. Because there there's a shi'ar on the day of judgment, and this is that Allah Azza wa Jalla says, لا ظلم اليوم. Today, no one will be treated unjustly. Everyone will be treated justly. This is the day of judgment, and this is Allah Azza wa Jalla is the judge, and this is the court of Allah Azza wa Jalla. So, brothers, if we understand these verses carefully, deeply, and if we reflect upon the meaning of these verses, we have to understand our positions. We have to understand who we really are, why we are here. We have to understand that we are in this dunya. Really, we are not living in this dunya. We have to understand that we are living this dunya. We are not in the process of living. No, we are in the process of living. Yes, in pronouncement there's a similarity, but there's a big difference. To think that we are confronting death, we all die, and we all one day rise up and stand before Allah Azza wa Jalla, and Allah Azza wa Jalla will judge all of us. We ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to make us successful in this dunya and al-akhirah. Allahumma ighfir lil-mu'minina wal-mu'minat wal-muslimina wal-muslimat al-ahya'i minhum wal-amwat innaka sami'un qareebun mujibud da'awat. Allahumma arham mawtana واشف مرضانا وسلم أحياءنا وآمن روعاتنا. اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى. اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. أقم الصلاة يرحمك الله.